Hey everyone, Tony D with another hot take. This one's going to be about updating a few things that I've talked about. Um, I don't know. So we'll see. Maybe I'll rename it if I get 20 minutes into one subject. But a lot of these are short updates. First, let me get dispense with the comic book industry. The latest update. Just watched the Yellow Flash and. He is talking about this new distribution model that they're trying to push to save comic book stores, wherein you're somehow going to read digital comics and not have to go to the store anymore, which seems to me a way to wean people off of paper comics. Don't see how that's going to save the comic book stores, but I guess they're going to take the money and then you're going to be able to read them digitally and then get the copy later when they finally ship. I'm not sure that's going to work. I mean, I have to be realistic about the situation, the economics here. A lot of people are now out of work and their futures are uncertain. Now, it could be that in 2 or 3 months, we all go back to work, whatever the heck we were doing, and like nothing ever happened. That could be possible. I kind of doubt it. I kind of think we're in for some rough months, rough enough that people are going to be desperately looking for things that they need to cut just to cut their overhead. So comic books is certainly going to be in that realm. I think, however, this isn't a totally dumb move by the publishers and the comic book stores in that people are stuck at home. They still have a little bit of money and they're expecting money from the government and unemployment. So a lot of people will still not think down the road and continue to buy their comics just to give them something to do while stuck indoors. So it may not be the worst idea ever. The problem is, of course, these comic book stores, it depends on who they are. Now, if you have a comic book store in which you kept track of all your customers and have their contact info because they had a pull list and you had their credit card on file and you charged them regularly without even them coming into the store to make sure you didn't lose any money on a subscription kind of basis, then you're probably okay because it'll be easy to contact your customers one at a time and say, well, this is the new system. Let me set you up here and you're computer literate. Unfortunately, as the Yellow Flash points out, a lot of the guys who run comic book stores are older, like in my age range, and they may not be totally computer savvy. And in fact, a lot of these guys are the last holdouts against the computer revolution in some respects. They don't like the whole reason they sell comic books and vintage stuff is they don't like new. They like old. So there's going to be a lot of guys who just, you're not going to be able to teach them this. They're just going to throw up their hands and they go, well, I'll have to wait until this is over and see if I could still open my store. The other thing Yellow Flash mentioned, which I did not know this, and he didn't know this either, but somebody pointed out that they're starting to go back and edit images in old Marvel comics, specifically Marvel's Wolverine smoking. They're editing out his cigar, which I find totally ridiculous for a few reasons. Number one, Wolverine's regenerative powers allowed him to smoke without any consequences. That was well established within the Marvel U. And number two, it's just a cartoon character, and the idea like, well, we got to get rid of that because our comics really appeal to kids. Yeah, I could see that your comic books, your current crop of comic books in which you have, Wolverine, Cyclops, and Jean Grey in a 3-way love affair, an actual 3-way tryst. Yeah, that's really appealing to kids that you're doing that. And all your obsessive gender nonsense in your comics. Yeah, that's really appealing to the kids. Yeah, if the kids are in their mid-20s and just got out of college in their gender studies class and don't buy comics, yeah, it's really appealing to them to hear that Marvel Comics is so woke. Unfortunately, it doesn't translate into sales. So, stupidity abounds in the world of comics still. Oh, and Yellow Flash also points out that the Gotham High video that CB and I looked at in the live stream, they've disabled the comments, which, you know, in a way it's kind of smart in that, you know, other than getting ratioed, and I think it's like a 2,000 upvotes and 20,000 downvotes, you know, they won't have to hear fanboys, you know, make fun of them, which is probably a good PR move in the short term, but in the long term, I mean, it doesn't bode well for the entire concept. I think the whole thing is just going to be shut down at some point, and they'll blame it on the current crisis, but it was just a dumb idea. All right, moving on. Speaking of dumb ideas, China and the Communist Party. The regular media is now sort of getting on board with what a lot of the YouTubers have been saying, and myself, is that China was totally lying about their numbers. They have been from the beginning. There's absolutely no reason for the Communist Party of China to tell anybody right numbers. Just no reason. And if you're going to lie by 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, what difference does it make? You might as well make up a number. Additionally, we're talking about a country of over 1 billion people, over 1.5 billion people that are crammed together in some areas of the country. Very, very cramped. Very densely populated in some of these Chinese cities, where they don't have the same rules as we do in terms of building codes and other things that regarding the safety and pollution. You're going to sit there and tell me that they cured this crisis, disease, whatever you want to call it. You know, I can't say it because YouTube. Thanks, YouTube, communist YouTube. So they obviously have been lying about it because they're communist. And when you have a communist government, you essentially have a dictatorship, essentially. The current president of China is a dictator. He doesn't call himself a dictator, obviously. You know, it's all about the people, but it's not. I mean, these guys, look, when this first broke out, there was already rumors online, even before the videos of people being welded into their apartments, that the crematoriums in China were running nonstop. They stopped counting people. Number one, you know, they were overwhelmed. I mean, to some extent, they couldn't count the people. There were just too many people getting sick and dying. Secondly, if they wanted to not get the blame for this, and they clearly don't want the blame because it will hurt them economically in a lot of other ways, you know, this was their, you know, PR spin. I mean, it's easy to do that. Look, governments lie, and communist governments lie even bigger. Our government lies, and we have like a fairly good system here. I mean, you got to figure the Chinese government, where there's zero consequences. Look, our government lies, but they get caught and there are consequences. Elections are consequences. Bad PR are consequences. There are consequences. I've said all through this that, you know, the resistance, pressure against Trump is partly a consequence, and it does put pressure on Trump to be good. I think that the resistance is too much. It's too ridiculous. They're unfocused, but it does keep Trump from doing anything too crazy because he'll get caught. So there's no pressure like that in the Chinese government. None. So The only pressure is if the whole country's going to unravel and, try to kill everybody and try to kill the leaders. And that's not going to happen because they're oppressed. You have no further to look than Tiananmen Square. The only question is this. Are things so destabilized over there that another Tiananmen Square-like event, could that finally tip things in favor of the protesters? Could the military fall to pieces, or turn against the leadership of the government because too many people are dying? If too many people in the military die from this crisis, that's a real problem. It's on two fronts. Number one, the guys in the military, well, they don't want to die. So they're going to look to the government and say, you're killing everybody here. It's no sense listening to you now, and we have the guns. On the opposite end of that, if too many of the military die or get sick from this, then there's nobody to oppress the masses. And then the masses are like, hey, where are all the troops? That's why they had some riots over there. They had a video of it, I think it was in Hubei province, but one of the protesters grabbed a cop's shield, like riot shield, and beat him with it. So, and of course, China also closed down their movie theaters a second time because of this crisis. They're also trying to spin it that the United States did this, that it's really foreigners coming back, reinfecting people. You can't trust anything coming out of China. You can't. They don't want to take the blame for this. The Communist Party doesn't take the blame for anything. If they have a problem, they just blame somebody. They don't take the blame. Why would they? Why? Think about that for a second. Do you think for a second that our government or any government would take the blame for anything if there was no consequence to it? They don't take the blame for much now. And there are consequences. You think they're going to take the blame? Absolutely not. For nothing. From the Communist Party's perspective, their line has always been everything's perfect. Everything is perfect. We don't make mistakes. Other people make mistakes. We are perfect in every way. The only mistakes that happen are accidents or miscommunication or people doing bad things to us. That's the way the communist line has always been. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you're talking Soviet Union, Cuba, any government whatsoever. That's their first take. Oh, something happened? Well, it wasn't our fault. The U.S. government does that all the time. Somebody got drone bombed? Well, those were militants. Oh, you have proof that they weren't militants? Well, it was an accident. That's what our government does all the time. So you're telling me that the Chinese government is going to be truthful about probably the biggest mistake in the history of the world, where thousands of people are dead? You think the Chinese government is going to take responsibility for that? You're out of your mind. You don't have to have proof. You don't have to go. The Chinese government expelled all the reporters. All the foreign reporters are gone. Why would they do that? Why would they do that? Look, you don't have to be there for proof to understand how governments work and how communist governments work. They lie. They all lie. But communist governments, because they have no consequences, they're going to lie even more. The Politburo in communist China doesn't mean anything. They're just going to vote how the president wants. That's it. What are you going to do? Look, only a full-blown delusional communist would give any credence to the Chinese government, any whatsoever, which is why the World Health Organization did. Because, as it turns out, and I did not know this, but a few days ago this came out, the World Health Organization is run by an actual communist. Now, he's from Africa. I forget which country in Africa, but He's not even a medical doctor, and he is running things and basically carrying water for the Chinese. Now he can't, obviously, because now public sentiment is turning against him. There are some actual consequences in the World Health Organization. You can lose your job. You know, PR is going to be a thing there. Not in communist China. They control the PR. They are the ones who dictate what the reporters say and report. So, what are the numbers in China? Well, you have to look at it this way. When they announced the word that got out about this disease was so, what's the word? Anxious, crazy. People were warning us about the disease. That's an indication that it was really bad in China. And some of the videos coming out of there are pretty frightening, right? So the fact that they took such draconian measures, even though they're a communist country and they're generally draconian anyway, is an indication that many, many more people had gotten sick. Additionally, part of the issue is this. Things leak out, even under a communist regime. And in fact, because it's that kind of regime, it's likely to leak out because you can't rely on anything the government tells you there. So when you want real information, do you go to the government website? No. You ask your friend who has an aunt, who knows who's married to a guy in a certain Politburo or local government or whomever. And from there, you hear the word. You don't get it over email because they're monitoring all the emails. You get it from word of mouth. Now, that's not necessarily 100% reliable, but that's probably more reliable than anything that's coming out of the Chinese government or on their intranet. It's intranet over there, not internet. Intranet, totally censored. So they knew things were coming down the pike, that these draconian measures were coming. And certain people get warned and others don't. So the moment something like this happened, you can't contain it. Because some person who's in the know, a wife or cousin or whomever, they have a conscience, they start telling people, you gotta get out of Wuhan. You gotta get out of Wuhan. I can't tell you why. Get out. That eventually spiraled out of control. And in fact, there's one report saying over 1 million people left the province before they started doing anything to crack down. That's probably true, which means the entire country got infected. We're talking probably a bit, the population of China is like 1.6 billion people. We're talking a good percentage of the country totally infected. So if it has a death rate of just, let's say it has a death rate of just 1%. It's been estimated as high as 3, but let's just say it's 1 for the sake of argument. 1.6 billion people. Let's cut it back. Not everybody's going to get infected. Let's say 1 billion people get infected. 2/3 of the population. Seems like a realistic number for an uncontrollable thing. Can't say it. So that would mean 10 million people got infected. Now, do the math on that. 20% of those 10 million people, which would be 200,000 people, would have needed serious hospitalization in a country where only certain areas had serious medical facilities and were probably greatly overwhelmed. And some of those people who weren't in serious condition became in serious condition because the hospital was just completely unavailable. I mean, I don't know if you saw the videos coming out of China of people just filling the hospital, just filling it. The hallways were just jam-packed with people. So imagine that. So I would say their numbers are upwards of 50 to 100,000 dead Easy. Easy. Possibly more. And they're hiding it. And additionally, they probably took the opportunity to kill off any of the dissidents that they had, queued up in their list of people to eventually take out. I mean, they kill dissidents in communist countries. They kill them. Now, it's better to throw them in jail and let them languish, but when you're in a crisis mode and you don't really want to deal with people, and you've got a lot of your law enforcement and goons sick too, you kind of got to take some shortcuts. And I'm sure they spent a lot of time killing those people, and they're probably killing the Uyghurs in record numbers now, because the world's now too busy concentrating on their own countries, and that's another reason they could do it, because they can get away with it. So China is a-hole, and never forget that. They're communist, and they're not to be trusted. So when you see the numbers and you say, oh my God, the United States is finally got the most cases in the world. No, that's China. I would say until until the truth comes out, which won't be years and years from now, I would conservatively estimate that the cases in China probably hit, in the millions and millions of people. Many millions unreported, and many hundreds of thousands that required hospitalization that probably didn't get it. Probably just waited in their quarantine camps to die. So that's the truth about China. That's the truth about comics. On to the next video.